What comes to mind when we hear the word aid? Most of us picture generosity, money flowing from rich countries to poor ones. But the story is more complicated than that. Hi, I'm Dr. Christie Agawu. In the series, we unpack the politics of aid and development in Africa. What exactly is aid? Who gives it? Who receives it? And why? We're breaking down foreign aid, its types, its history, and its real purpose, so we can better understand how it shapes development, power, and global inequality. But before we dive into all of that, let's just touch base on what is happening right now. The U.S. has been delaying and withholding USAID funding, and it's causing real consternation in many parts of the world. Countries that depend on this support for vital development and humanitarian programs. So what is really going on, and what does it mean for the future of aid? Let's ask, what is aid? Which is also known as Official Development Assistance, ODA. It is money or goods and services given by governments or institutions to promote economic development and welfare in low and middle income countries. It usually comes in three forms: grants, no repayment required; concessional loans, loans with below market interest rates; technical assistance, which pays for experts or provides training. But here's the key: aid is not always free, and it is rarely neutral. Aid, as we know it, really took off after World War II when the U.S. launched the Marshall Plan to rebuild Western Europe. In the 1950s and 60s, aid expanded as part of Cold War politics, a way for the U.S. and its allies on the one hand and USSR on the other to win influence in newly independent African and Asian countries. Then came the 1980s, a turning point. Many African and Latin American countries faced a massive debt crisis. The IMF and World Bank stepped in, but came with strict conditions: cut government spending, privatize public services, open up market. Now, these were called structural adjustment programs. By the 1990s, these reforms weren't just crisis responses. They became standard requirements for getting aid. The donors pushed countries to prove that they had the right economic policies and good governance in place. Aid was now tied not just to need, but to performance, and perhaps it should. Today, it's linked to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but it still reflects donor priorities and strategic interests. Take Nigeria, for instance. It receives substantial aid, not only for development and public health, but also for military operations against Boko Haram. Even amid corruption and human rights concerns, the aid continues. Why? Because Nigeria is a strategic partner in regional counterterrorism. In Uganda, long-term ruler Yoweri Museveni remains a key ally in US and EU peacekeeping efforts in Somalia and refugee management. Despite democratic backsliding and political repression, aid flows remain steady. Stability and regional influence often outweigh governance reform. Ask yourself, why are the rich countries aiding the poor nations if not to ensure that it works in their favor, even if it doesn't work so well for the recipient countries? Now, let's break aid down even further. Aid comes in two forms. It's called bilateral aid when it goes directly from one government to another government. Think USAID of America to Kenya, say. FCDO, which formerly used to be DFID, of the UK to Sierra Leone, or AFD of France to Senegal. Multilateral aid when funds are pooled from multiple countries and donors and channeled through institutions called the World Bank, UNDP, or the African Development Bank. Even private foundations like the Gates Foundation and regional blocs like the EU contribute. These funds are then distributed across many regions and sectors. Aid comes either tied or untied usually. Tied aid must be spent on goods or services from the donor country. Untied aid gives recipients more of a choice, but still has its conditions. The type of aid matters because it affects who benefits. Bilateral aid can either be tied or untied depending on the donor's conditions. Multilateral aid is usually untied, but can still be shaped by donor preferences or earmarked funding. What is the real purpose of aid? And what are the hidden politics? On paper, aid is about reducing poverty, promoting development, but in practice, it often serves strategic goals. Gaining political influence over the recipient governments, for instance, opening up new markets for the donors' exports, promoting ideological or governance models. Even the biggest donors, the US, the UK, China, often tie aid to contracts, conditions, or access to resources. It isn't just charity, it is a geopolitical tool. So what do we say? Truth is, sometimes aid is helpful, sometimes it is harmful, but it is always tied to power, profit, and history. And to truly understand global development, we need to understand how aid works and who it works for. What does real aid look like to you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and let's keep the conversation going.